Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Unitarian Church in the Main Line. I'm Reverend John Morehouse. I'm the senior minister here. We gather today to pay tribute to the life of Luis Blasco and to express our love and admiration for him and his fabulously wonderful life. We all know that our time on the planet is brief, and yet despite death's shadows, we are able to do so much. In Shakespeare's words, we must die, we know 'tis but the time and the drawing days out that men stood upon. Luis stood upon his days with dignity, adventure, and purpose. Even with death's inevitability, he lived his life as he believed, independent and with a virtue that is perhaps unsurpassed, a willingness to be loyal and a willingness to chart new territory and to endeavor on great adventures. So for this and much more, we do have this sense of loss in his going, but it's combined also with the recognition that if death does come as it does, it is well that it is ours to pay tribute to the life that still was lived. The purpose of our proceeding here today is to celebrate his life, to celebrate all he was and all he meant to all of you. Today is a day for memories, remembered, of course, by family and friends, members of this congregation to which he and his wife Mimi belonged for many years. But we hope also an idea that you are the beneficiaries of his lessons. Everyone who passes offers life lessons to us who are living. Maya Angelou once wrote, "When I think of death, and of late the idea has come with alarming frequency, I seem at peace with the idea that a day will dawn when I will no longer be among those living in this valley of strange humors. I can accept the idea of my own demise, but I am unable to accept the death of anyone else. I find it impossible to let a friend or relative go into that country of no return. Disbelief becomes my close companion, and anger often follows in its wake. I answer the heroic question, 'Death, where is thy sting?' with, 'Oh, it is here, in my heart, in my mind, in my memories.' And while the sting is there, let us remember the life that was lived. Whether there is another side to this life or not, I don't think is ours to know. But we do know that Luis lived and his life changed our world. So we come together from different places across branching streams to this one river to reflect and celebrate on his remarkable life. Our world is diminished with his passing, but he left us to continue his dreams. Our service will proceed today as in the order of service, and each speaker and musical selection will happen in turn. It is good to be together.
To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to pluck up that which is planted. A time to kill, and a time to heal. A time to break down, and a time to build up. A time to weep, and a time to laugh. A time to mourn, and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to get, and a time to lose. A time to keep, and a time to cast away. A time to rend, and a time to sow. A time to keep silence, and a time to speak. A time to love, and a time to hate. A time of war, and a time of peace. Thank you.
We the mortals touch the metals, the wind, the ocean shores, the stones, knowing they will go on, inert or burning. And I was discovering, naming all these things, it was my destiny to love and say goodbye.
Thank you all for coming. As I look out on this room and think of all the Spanish family and friends who are joining virtually, I'm struck by the long and wonderful life my father lived, the lives he touched, and the different aspects of his personality which we all celebrate today. This is going to go on for a while. I can be verbose, and life like my dad's is tough to summarize quickly. My dad was born in Tarragona, Spain in 1938, the oldest child of Salvador and Conchita Blasco, Trevor and my grandparents. As I look at pictures from my dad's childhood, and I've looked at a lot of them in the last week, I can't help but be struck by what a long and marvelous life he lived. When I look at childhood pictures of him in pre-World War II Spain, under the dictatorship of Franco, those pictures feel as far away to me today as our own Civil War in the 1860s. From those humble beginnings, my father grew up to become a world-renowned doctor at Penn, a pioneer in infertility medicine, and was even called to Morocco at one point to care for the Queen there. All of this he did in English, a language he didn't even learn until he was in his 30s. It was an amazing life, and yet, even though he lived 85 years, I can't help but feel that his life was cut short, and we were robbed of many years together. Such was the strength and vitality of my father that he remained active well into his 80s, taking long bike rides, skiing, traveling the world, and just being generally an active member in all facets of his life, of our lives, until cancer began to sap his strength just a few months ago. Others can speak better to my father's childhood or the type of doctor or friend that he was. What I want to do today is describe to you the father that he was to me. They say that children are like trees, and then in order to reach for the sky, they need a solid foundation and strong roots underneath them. I was blessed to have the parents I did because there was no better support system than the two of them, and there was not a day in my childhood that I did not know that I was loved. And yet, while I always knew that both of my parents loved me unconditionally, they loved in very different ways. My mother's love was universal. She was a woman who deeply loved humanity and was committed to the dignity of every human life. My dad's love was personal. He loved my brother and me. Everyone else, he wasn't so sure about. I'm sure people in this room were also in the circle of people that he loved. One only had to walk into my dad's office and see his family photos strewn from one end to the other to know that he was a typical Spanish father with enormous pride in his family and children. For my father, family was everything. Some of you may be familiar with the ethical dilemma presented in college philosophy courses. There's a runaway train headed toward a loved one. Do you redirect that train and save your family member if redirecting it means that you're going to kill an innocent bystander? I honestly don't know what the answer would be for my mother. I suspect that she would just throw herself in front of the train and refuse to kill anyone. I do know, however, what the answer would be for my father. Infinite. There's no limit to the number of innocent people that my father would sacrifice for those he knew and loved. For my father, family was everything, and my brother and I were the beneficiaries of that. All my life, everyone, including my father, always referred to me as my mother's son. And for sure, there are many ways in which I'd like to think I'm a continuation of her. The truth of the matter, though, is it's hard for me to think of either my father or my mother without thinking of both of them. They were always a team, and I have very few memories of spending time with one and not the other. It was always family time that we spent together. For today's eulogy, however, I wanted to focus on the attributes that were uniquely my father's. and where I work every day to live up to the example he set for me. The first attribute where my father was unparalleled was simple grit. You see, while my father was always smart, it wasn't IQ that took my father from a small town in Spain to an endowed chair at a world-renowned university and medical institution. It was sheer determination and drive. My father never backed down from anyone or anything. And my father instilled in me a love of hard work and competition that I still cherish to this day. I still remember being a child 10 years old, learning how to play tennis with my father, and consistently getting trounced. For any fathers in this room who maybe have let their children win a game they didn't deserve to win, you should know that was not my father's approach to parenting. He would always say to me, "When you beat me, you will know that you have earned it. There are no gimmies in this family." And there weren't. I can't help but laugh as I think back to that memory. As parents today, all we do is try to instill confidence in our children by telling them that they are smart, that they are athletic, and more often than not, by letting them win something they probably shouldn't. As my sons know, I always let you win one-on-one basketball, and you did not deserve it. Too often, though, this strategy backfires. And instead of a confident child, what we end up with is an entitled one who believes that the world is there to serve them. My father's approach was probably non-traditional, and I'm sure you wouldn't find it in a parenting manual, but I can tell you for a fact that nothing instills confidence more than by forcing someone to work hard for something, to achieve something difficult. To this day, I still remember the day I was 12, after years of practice, and I finally beat my father. It was quite possibly the happiest day in my life. I know, that was a joke, honey. Wedding first, birth of my children second, then the day I beat my father in tennis when I was 12. I still remember running up to the net with a smile from ear to ear and saying to my father, "Well, Dad, it finally happened. I finally beat you. I guess that I'm now the family's best tennis player." And my father, true to form, kind of a gruff voice, said, "It's just one match. I didn't play that well, and next time I'll get you." That was my father. I'm extremely happy to let you know that he didn't beat me the next time. In fact, I got better and better, and by high school, the matches weren't even close anymore. But for those of you who know my father well, you know the story didn't end in high school. Most fathers in their 50s would accept that their best tennis days were behind them. Not my father. He doubled down, taking tennis lessons, playing every day, and always competing. And as he got older, he got better. He actually played the best tennis of his life probably in his 50s and 60s. And alas, as I got older and had kids of my own, my tennis skills declined. And we were able to have some epic and highly competitive matches for many years in adulthood. Ironically, the last time we played was 3 years ago when my mother was ill and I came back to this area and she passed away. My father was 82. I was 47. Hank, you were there. You remember it well. And when you know the bastard beat me. That was my father. Always working, always pushing, and always finding a way to win in the end. The other way that I think my father was unparalleled was his profound sense of adventure and a love of life that was just contagious. There is no adventure my father would not take. For him, life presented opportunities to be enjoyed, not risks to be managed. I still remember sitting on a swing set being pushed by my father and him asking me, "How hard do you want me to push? How high do you want to go?" I would say, as a typical little kid would say, "High, I want to go higher." And he would start pushing higher and higher. But then a funny thing would start to happen. I would get pushed so high, my butt would start coming out of the chair. And I would get scared. And I would start asking my father to come down, and not in such a calm voice. Inevitably, I'd start crying out, saying I'd had enough, and my mom would come racing over and get involved in the fray. I'd hear her voice in the background, "Louis, I think Ian's going high enough. Don't push any higher." My father, though, just kept pushing. You see, my father saw his role in our upbringing as pushing me to the edge, and possibly beyond my comfort zone. Just as he had lived his own life, he wanted me to know that sometimes you will feel a boundary, but rather than give in to that boundary, you need to push through it. Again, my father's approach was counterintuitive. We all love our children, but we all want to keep them safe. But while my father always kept me safe, he also knew that at times he had to make me uncomfortable so I could grow. I am 100% sure that I am not the person, that I would not be the person I am today had my father not trusted me to face every challenge and push higher. For it was from him that I learned that if the mountain seems high, you will only summit it if you start to take the first step. It's a philosophy that he brought to his own life, and an example I seek to follow every day. It's also an approach that my father brought to the very end of his life. When my father was first diagnosed with cancer back in July, he faced immediate complications. Somehow, though, he still made it up to New England to see me and my children, and even flew to Europe within days of a quick procedure here, medical procedure, and a trip to the emergency room, because it was a vacation that he really wanted to take. When I told my college roommate that my father had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and then told him 4 weeks later that my dad was in Europe enjoying a vacation, his comment to me was, "I'm thrilled to hear it was a misdiagnosis." If only that were true. But no, that was my father doing what very few would do and pushing through fear to live life on his terms, even right up until the end. My father was extremely thankful he was able to take that trip because it gave him 4 wonderful weeks to see and interact with lifetime friends and Spanish family while still healthy enough to enjoy them. We have a short video that we'll be playing outside that we've put together of my family, but I think you'll see that his spirit of adventure comes through in every picture in that video. My father continued to live until the very last minute. So, in summary, as I think about my father's life, thoughts of his passing will always sadden me, but memories of his life will always bring me joy. He lived an incredible life, succeeded beyond all reasonable expectations in every arena, enjoyed life to the fullest with a healthy, active lifestyle that continued to within months of his death. Even his illness and ultimate death was as good as it could possibly be. He died peacefully in his sleep, in his own bed, in his house of 46 years, with a full complement of family and friends, Joanne, Trevor, his sister Nuria from Spain, his brother-in-law, and Melitza, one of his best friends through life, all by his side. Steve and Hank were there also several times in that last week, as well as many, many other friends. We had so many visitors these past few months. So I'm thankful every day that I was lucky enough to have had the father I had, not just for the father he was, but the color and light he brought to our lives. As those who know him, he was never boring, for sure. In my life, with his unconditional love and support, his sense of adventure, his hunger for life, the grit and determination, I'd like to think he passed some of that on to me. Dad, I love you, and I will always be thankful for the father you were to me, and I will always remember and cherish you. Thank you.
Take off the mask. Good morning. Ian, thank you for those kind words. It was very heartfelt. Good morning to, my voice is okay. I'm gonna try and get through this. Good morning to the Spanish family out there, and good morning to everyone. Again, thank you for being here. So I wanted to take this opportunity to remember my dad as I reflect on the many years we were fortunate enough to spend together. As my brother just highlighted so beautifully, my father was a man with a love of adventure, a passion for knowledge and history, and a person with strong family values. He was a consistent supporter of me, a role model, and a leader in our family. For my eulogy, I wanted to share some personal memories with you that capture all these sentiments for me. In 1998, my dad and I took a group bicycle tour to trace the path of the history of the Civil War. We biked out to Antietam to Harper's Ferry and then Gettysburg. My dad's sense of adventure was ever present as we explored the different historical locations together. I have to admit, I was shocked that my dad would actually want to camp along the Potomac River in the first place, but the fact that he knew that I would really enjoy something like that was the reason he wanted to do it with me. As most people know who know him closely, my dad was the highlight of the trip for many on that tour. With his ability to tell stories about his personal experience and his world travels, he made everyone laugh and hang on his every word. Along with his animated storytelling, I saw him connect with almost everyone on that trip on a personal level. And he also did with me. I saw my dad in a different light on that trip, a sometimes unfamiliar side of him that I really, really loved. He was carefree and truly in his element. We biked many miles each day together and just enjoyed each other's company. That trip was very special to me. I felt closer to my dad after it. This feeling would come back several times throughout the years on additional bicycle and kayaking trips we took together. I felt as though my dad craved to be with me on these solo trips because it was time away from the normal daily hustle, and for us to be together and share in these new experiences together. I was happy to see him continue these outdoor adventures that were a part of him with family and even sometimes solo. They included a horseback riding and fishing trip in Montana in 1996, hang gliding in 2001, if you can believe that, and a rafting and camping trip in Idaho in 2002. Throughout my childhood, during the summer months, my brother and I were lucky enough to travel around the world with our parents. Spain, France, England, Greece, Turkey, and cities such as Leningrad were among the favorites. My dad's never stopped learning belief and love of history fueled these trips. He would memorize the travel books and maps that I had only browsed a sentence or two of. So even though it may have only been his first time there, it would have seemed to anyone listening that he knew a lot about the place already. Traveling was something we continued to do as a family. I saw many people and places that enriched my life and shared memories with both my parents of these trips that are still with me today. One such trip that I would like to share that I remember was in 2015 when we went to France together. Although we had been there before, my dad wanted to use the return opportunity to approach it in an entirely new way. Upon our arrival, he immediately turned into our tour guide, explaining all there was to know about the locations we were set to visit, as if he had lived there for years. But it was always the evening meal that would tell the story of how the day really went. If dinner was good and up to my dad's high standards, his happy stomach would inspire his accurate recounting of the day's lessons to me, reaffirming their historical significance and intent. At any time I felt like a written test would spring from my dad's travel bag, checking my knowledge from that day and all that I had learned. From visits to Notre Dame, the Eiffel Tower, the Louvre, and an evening Vivaldi concert in an old church near the Seine. These would be the special and memorable moments for me, but to spend them with my dad was even better. Lastly, I think it would be hard for me not to mention a conversation I had with my dad in July of 2021, when I had several significant life changes occur to me at once. Feeling a bit lost, I talked with my dad on a trip to the Philadelphia Zoo with my son and asked him if I could stay with him at the house until I figured out my next steps. I honestly did not know what he would say at the time or how he would feel about having us in the house with him, but without hesitation, he responded, yes. Since that decision and the years following, we became much closer than ever before. I am so grateful for that time that we had together. He was a wonderful and enthusiastic grandfather whose energy during playtime would often surpass my own. He was adored by his grandson, and they really took pleasure in each other's company. It was an incredible sight to see. It was then that I clearly knew what family meant to him. A short time after I returned to the house, another significant life event occurred, to which I sustained a bad injury at work. My dad, again, quickly responded by providing me with support and guidance to help me along my healing journey. Throughout his life, he always did the right thing for family, to which I am truly grateful. I love you, Dad. Thank you.
Hello, I think that my dad and my uncle both did a great job summarizing the man that Lewis was, and I wanted to talk a little bit more specifically about the man he was to me and the role he played in my life. And I think the most important thing that I could touch on was pretty much just to summarize it. From the time I was born, he was always there. I called him Bubba because before I could even talk, when he would take care of me, those were the only two syllables that I could pronounce, and that name has stuck until today. He was there to visit me when I was born. He was there every birthday, every Thanksgiving, every Christmas from that point on. Any big basketball game, a jiu-jitsu belt test, a soccer game, a recital, or pretty much any other life event that I could think of. He was in the car driving from Philly to Boston just so he could be there to attend in person. And I think because he was such a constant in my life and such a pillar for me from the time that I was born, I came to take this for granted. He was just there, and I didn't really appreciate how truly outstanding and abnormal it was for a person into their 60s and 70s to routinely drive 6 hours through traffic just to be in my life. In these past weeks and months, as I've had time to reflect on Lewis's life and the role that he played in mine, I truly came to appreciate just how much he went through throughout my entire life to keep us together as a family. I thought about when I was 10 years old, and he offered me a birthday present of picking anywhere in the world where we could go together. In the end, after a lot of debate between me and him, we settled on Ecuador. We spent our days waking up at the crack of dawn, 4 a.m. before the sun had rose, to climb into canoes and spend our days drifting down the Amazon River. After that, we went to the Galapagos Islands. To this day, I still think back on the memories of that trip all the time, and still tell all my friends at school about the unbelievable stories and memories that that trip produced. But it wasn't just that one trip. Just last Thanksgiving, he planned a trip to the Dominican Republic so we could all spend Thanksgiving together once again. He brought me to meet his family and show me his home in Valencia. He came all the way to Martha's Vineyard just days after his diagnosis just to spend time with us. He helped plan family reunions every year that brought me together with family that I otherwise may never have met. Because of this effort, I have countless stories and memories with him that I will hold on to forever. Because of this effort, I've seen places around the world that I never would have imagined, and I have a newfound appreciation and adventurous spirit for life. Because of this effort, I've made connections that have grown my family exponentially. There's countless amazing things about the way that Lewis lived his life that I think we could all benefit to follow in his footsteps. But I think the most important lesson that Lewis ever taught me is that family and love is worth the work. No matter how inconvenient or difficult it may be, whether loved ones are close or far away, no matter what it takes, you must always be willing to put in the work to make family a priority. I'm forever grateful at the way Louis worked and made me a priority in his life. And while I will miss him dearly, I'm so thankful that his effort has built a lifetime worth of memories for me to hold on to. And I actually had a different conclusion to this, but last night as I was reading it over for the last time, I started to reflect and I looked back at our texts, and I found a text where, in his final days, even when he couldn't get out of bed or come to see me when he was too weak, he still sent me a text that said, "Thinking of you, grandson, always remember me." No matter where he was or what he was going through, he still found a way to make an effort to stay a pillar in my life and to let me know that he would always be there. And for that, I will always love him. Thank you.
Ian, Trevor, Joanne, and your families, I'm sorry for your loss and our loss. But Louis died encircled by your loving kindness, holding your hands and the hands of his colleagues and friends, Melitza Osmanos, who flew in from Sacramento to help care for him. I first met Louis in 1976 on the labor floor at the Hospital of the University of Pennsylvania. I was a resident, and he wondered if I knew what I was doing. Yes, he did deliveries. He took care of pregnant people. In fact, Louis was a naturally compassionate and empathic doctor, a lot like his mentor, Luigi Mastriani. After medical school in Spain, Louis went to the Belgian Congo as a general medical and surgical officer with the goal to be a tropical medicine specialist. And I wish he was here to tell those stories. I heard them many times over the years, but no one could tell the stories like Louis. He told about performing C-sections in the Frontier Hospital with conduction anesthesia, which he administered himself. His iconic story, which many of you may have heard, was when the local bishop flew in with an abscessed tooth needing to be pulled. He had a set of dental instruments, a book with illustrations, and a very insistent patient. Louis was recruited to Penn by the pioneering infertility surgeon Celso Ramon Garcia at the beginning of infertility as a subspecialty. And as you might know, the 2010 Nobel Prize in Medicine was awarded to the scientist who invented IVF. But there was no IVF when Louis started. Infertility care was a surgical specialty in need of research and discovery. The courageous patients and doctors were desperate to cure tubal infertility, the most common female infertility problem worldwide. Dr. Garcia and Dr. Blasco performed laparoscopies to diagnose the problems and two-stage tuboplasties to repair the tubes. These were long and involved surgeries, and unfortunately, not too successful. And then post-op rounds began at 7 p.m. Those late-night rounds with Dr. Garcia were part of Louis and my retirement stories. Louis's research and clinical leadership was in male infertility, sperm problems, and cervical mucus studies. You can imagine the stories Louis told about collecting monkey cervical mucus from the rhesus monkey colony at Penn. Louis worked with these understandably uncooperative and vicious monkeys to collect sticky cervical mucus. Louis also directed Penn's donor sperm program long before the ability to perform personalized DNA testing. Everything changed in our field with in vitro fertilization. But remember, IVF was new. Should this new treatment be embraced? What was going to be the outcome? It took desperate and courageous patients along with pioneer doctors. Louis told a reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer, We were starting an in vitro fertilization program, and the personal pressure was immense. Lewis and Richard Turek were the clinical part of the team, which included embryologists, endocrine lab specialists, anesthesiologists, and OR staff, which helped the first woman in the tri-state area and one of the first in the United States to have a successful IVF pregnancy. That IVF baby now has a child. In those old days, we performed egg retrievals through single lens laparoscopes, no monitors, no cameras, and then Dr. Blasco would give you the scope and it was your turn to look. We occasionally even performed open laparotomies to harvest eggs. Dr. Blasco and Mastroianni was always skeptical of other doctors' reports and techniques. So Lewis and his good friend and our colleague who died way too young, Dr. Richard Turek, traveled to Europe to see for themselves ultrasound-guided egg retrievals. They returned convinced that this was a safer technique. I inherited many of Dr. Blasco's patients, and they would say, "Please let Dr. Blasco know how much I miss him and how I am forever grateful to him for his helping us to start a family." Lewis, a full professor of obstetrics and gynecology at Penn, has an extensive bibliography. His studies on cervical mucus, sperm-mucus interaction, the donor sperm program at Penn, and pioneering work in infertility, but not any in tropical medicine. Instead, he is one of the original pioneering IVF doctors. Mimi and Lewis, Natalie and I shared many times together from those early days in West Philadelphia. I fondly recall staying at their house at Ganoga in the Poconos with Ian and Trevor and our children. Mimi leading an ecumenical Sunday worship service. Lewis the atheist and us the Jews were uplifted, even though Lewis was always insistent he was not spiritual. Lewis and I attended professional meetings together, often rooming together to save the department a little money. Along with Christos and Don Wolf, we attended the first IVF International Conference in Israel. Lewis, a master student of many languages, enjoyed teasing me on my language skills in Israel. Do you speak English? When we attended American Fertility Society meetings, we would try to get a hotel with tennis lessons, and then later review what we learned. Even after retiring from Penn as a professor, Lewis continued as a reproductive endocrinologist and infertility teacher and mentor at Drexel, Hahnemann, Lankenau, and Bryn Mawr. Lewis, ever the stubborn realist, with a bit of anger, declined therapy for his stage 4 pancreatic cancer and required hospice care at home. I learned from him even in death. Lewis, doctor, surgeon, scientist, pioneer, teacher, and friend, I miss you.
My name is Hank Langsam. I was a close friend of Luis Blasco, loved him much, and miss him greatly. I first met Luis over 15 years ago as a player in a Sunday winter tennis game at the Germantown Cricket Club with a group of about 7 other people. Luis was a great player and a perfect addition to this group. We really wanted him to join the GCC so we could spend more time getting to know him and play tennis with him, a decision he had to think about hard. But after becoming a member, Luis became a welcomed friend and player in about 8 different tennis groups and became the center of a web of several dozens of players. The choice to join the GCC proved to be a wonderful decision. I hope for Luis and his family, but definitely for all those of us who got to know him, love, and play tennis with Luis. I was lucky enough to get to know Luis, Mimi, Ian, Trevor, and Joanne, a wonderful family as well. Luis played tennis sometimes 5 or 6 days a week, and sometimes 2 times a day. As friends from GCC and McGarity, another tennis outlet, can attest, one cannot imagine a much stronger and fitter person who played into his mid-80s. During COVID, everyone was isolated and virtually shut into their houses, beginning in about March, April of 2020. Everyone was stir-crazy and fearful. Around mid-June, GCC opened up the tennis courts to play because it was an outside activity and people were not too close to one another. This became a lifesaver for all of our well-being. 4 of us, Luis, Bill, David, and me, played almost every day from about June 15 until about December 16, well into the winter, when the snow and cold just cut it out. We shared play, discussions, politics, and society each day during COVID. What a windfall. Luis was very special. Not only was he a professor of obstetrics and gynecology with an emphasis on reproduction at the University of Pennsylvania and later at Lankenau and Hahnemann, but he was distinguished worldwide. He was once called to Morocco for gynecological work for the King of Morocco's family. He trained literally hundreds and hundreds of doctors in his field who practiced throughout the world during his career. One of my daughters had an ovarian cyst, and I immediately turned to Luis for help. He picked up and ran with the ball right away. Eventually, he and his friend and former fellow, Dr. Michael Glassner, operated on her. Luis was not actually operating at that time, but he was so kind and concerned that he gowned up and attended the surgery. We weren't sure how the cysts could affect her ability to get pregnant, but as a result of this successful surgery, we were overjoyed that my daughter was eventually able to give birth to my 2 wonderful grandchildren. Luis was a world traveler. I don't think I know anyone who has traveled more than Luis. He has been to almost every place you can think of. I asked him where his favorite visit was during his final time at home. And he thought his trip to Egypt was possibly one of his best trips. I think he was with his family on that trip, and that made it so special. My wife, Leah, who has since passed, and me, traveled with Luis and Mimi to Spain, where we stayed at their condominium outside of Valencia with them, and then traveled around Spain. We had a wonderful, interesting, and off-the-beaten-path trip engineered by Luis. Luis made friends easily. One of the reasons was that one's character shows through when you play competitive sports. Do you give honest calls? Are you kind? Are you grumpy or fun to play with? Do you show up on time? Do you have a kind, encouraging word to say about your partner and your opponents? Luis just had high character, a warm and kindly friendliness, and a passion for people. I guess I would be remiss if I did not briefly describe Luis's play. He was strong, fleet of foot, constantly improving, sneaky, and deceptive on the court, but fun to play with. I also should share that he played all over the world. When I visited him in Valencia, we went out to his childhood friend's court. I think his name was Andres. To play with Andres and with other friends during that week. We could not miss too much tennis, even when we were traveling. Everyone who met Luis knew he was very special, and I received the kindest condolences after his passing, which truly touched my heart. What a man, what a friend, what a doctor, what a husband, father, brother, and grandfather. Thank you for allowing me to deliver my heartfelt feelings on this incredible person I was lucky enough to call my friend. I miss you, my dear, wonderful friend, Luis.
Hello, my name's Sam Fisher. I'm here to share a poem that was one of Luis's favorites. This poem is a metaphor for the journey of life in a quest for knowledge and enrichment, which is very fitting for Luis. As you set out for Ithaca, hope your road is a long one, full of adventure, full of discovery. Lastrygonians, Cyclops, angry Poseidon, don't be afraid of them. You'll never find things like that on your way as long as you keep your thoughts raised high, as long as a rare excitement stirs the spirit and your body. Lastrygonians, Cyclops, wild Poseidons, you won't encounter them unless you bring them inside your soul, unless your soul sets them up in front of you. Hope your road is a long one. May there be many summer mornings when, with what pleasure, what joy, you enter harbors you're seeing for the first time. May you stop at Phoenician trading stations to buy fine things, mother of pearl and coral, amber and ebony, sensual perfume of every kind, as many sensual perfumes as you can, and may you visit many Egyptian cities and learn to go on learning from their scholars. Keep Ithaca always in your mind. Arriving there is what you're destined for, but don't hurry the journey at all. Better if it lasts for years, so you're old by the time you reach the island, wealthy with all you've gained on the way, not expecting Ithaca to make you rich. Ithaca gave you the marvelous journey. Without her, you wouldn't have set out now. She has nothing left to give you now. And if you find her poor, Ithaca won't have fooled you. Wise as you will have become, so full of experience, you'll have understood by then what these Ithacas mean. Thank you.
I'm Melitza, and I'm a long-time Luis's friend, and I just want to read a short poem from Robert Frost to you. Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her earliest leaf is a flower, but only so for an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf. So Eden sank to grief, so dawn goes down today, nothing gold can stay. Luis was a very dear friend, and it's very hard to see him go. But he left us with so many wonderful memories that will be remembered for many, many years to come. In my case, probably forever, until I can actually remember. And he was a special person. He will be remembered for his strength, for his love of life, for his daring to try everything new, everything difficult, and everything challenging in his life. Also, the life for his family, the love for his friends, is something that Luis lived for. So we remember Luis for many, many years. We love you, Luis. We miss you. And we won't say goodbye. We'll just say so long, Luis. Someday we are going to be reunited again.
I want to thank all of you for coming again and for the beautiful remarks that were made today. I want to thank our musicians for playing such beautiful music. We've come to the time in this service where we are done with this part of the remembrance, but of course, Luis lives on in our hearts with an appreciation that can be cared for in the years to come. He's left the world better than he found it, because of his work and because of his love for all of you. I want to close with these words from the poet Tagore. Peace, my heart. Let the time for parting be sweet. Let it not be a death, but a completeness. Let love melt into memory and pain into songs. Let the flight through the sky end in the folding of the wings over the nest. Let the last touch of your hands be gentle like the flower of the night. Stand still, O beautiful end, for a moment, and say your last words in silence. I bow to you and hold up my lamp to light you on your way. This concludes our service. Thank you. There will be a reception after the postlude.